So we're on week 3 of our fairy tale unit, and this week we're going to be starting a new story that we're going to be focusing on. You can see it down here in the bottom, how Dorothy saved the Scarecrow, so you probably have an idea of what it is already. Before we begin though, I want you guys to remember some things that we've learned about. So, what have we learned about in ways that dialogue can provide insights into a character's personality? Dialogue, remember, shows you about that character. It can reveal their traits, if they're angry, happy, sad, frustrated, lethargic. So dialogue is one of those things, besides just say, we can really use that dialogue as expression. Now, how does this help you remember how we reveal information about ourselves to others? Because remember, that's our essential question that we're focusing on. How can we reveal information to others about ourselves? One is through dialogue. One is through those details, those descriptions in a paragraph. So is there anything else that we can do? So just think about that as we read this next story. Before we begin though, I want you to remember what a key event is. And a key event is an important event in the story. It's one of the main things in a story. It gets the plot going, it fills information, which is a little bit different than a summary. A summary is a brief paragraph that reviews the important facts of the key events of the story. Remember when we did our last one with Peter and Wendy? We did a summary on each page where we summarized what was going on the side. So, using that, I want you guys to think about this. It's a dialogue piece from Wendy and Peter before we get started. Peter said, "How clever am I?" What does that show us about Peter? Well, it shows us that he thinks highly of himself. He thinks that he is special, unique. He says, "How clever am I?" He's bragging about himself. So let's see if we notice anything like that when we do Dorothy and the Scarecrow. Now, before we go, we have these key events that we'll be marking down, and a summary we'll be doing on each page. So remember that as we go along. It's going to help us when we review it that we don't have to read all these pages again. So this is our text right here, how Dorothy saved the Scarecrow. And we have a quick skim that we're going to do. So just look at the pictures. If there's a word that jumps out at you, notice that as well. What do you think this genre is? Remember, genre is what kind of story? Do you think it's fantasy? Do you think it's science fiction? Do you think it's nonfiction? Do you think it's adventure? What genre do you think it is? Well, if you said fairy tale, that would be a good choice. If you said fantasy, that is actually how the author, when they wrote it, classified it. So if you said fantasy, you did an excellent job. We notice here, we see these characters, the Scarecrow, the squirrel, and the dog, repeatedly on the pages, so I think that they're probably our main characters in this story. And since it's called Dorothy Saves the Scarecrow, my guess is that this is probably Dorothy, this is the Scarecrow, and there might be a dog whose name we find out later on. So let's begin reading, and as we read, we're going to take notes of some things. So we're going to read our introduction first. So let me slide on over. An excerpt from The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. The Wizard of Oz, 1939. It's one of the most popular films of all times. It is based on a series of popular children's novels written in the early 1900s. The excerpt here is from chapter 3 of the first book, entitled The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. So the text in italics on page 22 is not part of this story that we just read. It just tells me what happened in the earlier chapters that we're going to see, the story so far. A cyclone has whisked away young Dorothy and her dog Toto inside her Kansas farmhouse, so magical land of Oz. The house landed on the Wicked Witch of the East, killing her and thereby setting free the Munchkins. The grateful Munchkins send Dorothy to the Wizard of Oz in Emerald City. After she gets there, Dorothy hopes the wizard will help her get back home. In this chapter, Dorothy has set off on the yellow brick road and meets the Scarecrow. So the last sentence previews one key event in this chapter. Dorothy is going to meet the Scarecrow. I'm going to underline that. Even though it hasn't happened yet, it's one of my key events. So we're going to put Dorothy meets the Scarecrow. And that's going to be one of my key events right there. So let's head to our next part, which is our actual story. Dorothy bade her friends goodbye, and again started along the road for Yellow Brick. When she had gone several miles, she thought she would stop to rest, and so climbed to the top of a fence beside the road and sat down. There was a great cornfield beyond the fence, and not far away she saw a scarecrow, placed high on a pole to keep the birds from the ripe corn. So in this first paragraph, Dorothy sees the scarecrow for the first time. I'm going to label this event with the number 1. So she sees that scarecrow at the very beginning. We know a scarecrow is going to be important. So I'm going to put this right here as a number 1. And if you remember with the windy one, we were changing it to the color red, but since this is a longer story, I'm just going to leave it as this black one, and hopefully I'll be able to come and find them quickly when I refer back to them. Let's go to paragraph 2 and 3 now. Dorothy leaned her chin upon her hand and gazed thoughtfully at the scarecrow. Its head was a small sack stuffed with straw, with eyes, nose, and a mouth painted on it to represent a face. An old pointed blue hat that had belonged to some munchkin was perched on his head, and the rest of the figure was a blue suit of clothes, worn and faded, which had also been stuffed with straw. On the feet were some old boots with blue tops, such as every man wore in this country. The figure was raised above the stalks of corn by means of a pole stuck up its back. Now, in these 2 paragraphs I just read, there aren't any big events in these paragraphs, but we do get a description of the scarecrow. So now I can visualize what the scarecrow looks like. If I didn't have this picture, I would still be able to understand what his job is, and that he's not really very well put together, it seems like. So, I'm going to go to the next page and slide on over. So now we're on paragraph 4. When Dorothy was looking earnestly into the odd painted face of the scarecrow, she was surprised to see one of the eyes slowly wink at her. She thought she must have been mistaken at first, for none of the scarecrows in Kansas ever winked. But presently the figure nodded its head to her in a friendly way. Then she climbed down from the fence and walked up to it, while Toto ran around the pole and barked. "Good day," said the scarecrow, in a rather husky voice. "Did you speak?" asked the girl, in wonder. "Certainly," answered the scarecrow. "How do you do?" "I'm pretty well, thank you," replied Dorothy politely. "How do you do?" So, something big has happened in these paragraphs 4 to 8. The scarecrow winks at Dorothy and then speaks to her. These are important events, so I'm going to label them. Now I know this is not an ordinary scarecrow. So I'm going to label when he winks at her as event number 2. And let's just slide that up 1. And then when he starts speaking, that's going to be my next one, event number 3, because normally a scarecrow shouldn't speak. I know we're getting close to Halloween right now, but if you see us talking scarecrow, you might want to run. So now, I can use my notes to summarize what's happened in these chapters. I'm going to connect it back to paragraph 1, just because there was mostly the description of the scarecrow, and so I'm going to put it all together. So, we have Dorothy stops along the yellow brick road and meets the scarecrow that talks. So sometimes our summaries are short, sometimes our summaries are long. But if I want to add from our first paragraph up top, what else can I add to that? Because remember, our first paragraph said she bade her friends goodbye, and there was this great cornfield beyond the fence. Not far away she saw a scarecrow. So I'm going to, for my summary, put that part in as well. Dorothy sees a cornfield with a scarecrow. And I could change that word Dorothy, since I've already said her name here, I can put it to she. So that is my summary. Let me change the size of my text. There we go. Okay, so now let's head off to our next paragraph. Oops. We have a picture from the movie here as well. Remember, we use our captions to learn more about it. This is a scene from the award-winning movie, The Wizard of Oz, now a classic, 1939. So, paragraph 9 now. "I'm not feeling well," said the scarecrow with a smile, "for it is very tedious being perched up here night and day to scare away crows." "Can't you get down?" asked Dorothy. "No, for this pole is stuck up my back. If you'll please take away the pole, I shall be greatly obliged to you." Dorothy reached up both arms and lifted the figure off the pole, for, being stuffed with straw, it was quite light. "Thank you very much," said the scarecrow, when he had been set back down on the ground. "I feel like a new man." Dorothy was puzzled at this, for it sounded odd to hear a stuffed man speak, Let's see him bow and walk alongside her. So, paragraph 9 tells us a problem the Scarecrow has. What is it? Well, the problem is that he's stuck here and he can't get away. It says he's perched here night and day. So I'm going to put that as another event. I'm going to say that's our event number 4, is we're introduced to his problem. And then event number 5 is what? What does Dorothy do to solve this problem? Well, she basically saves him. She picks him up from the pole and sets him down. So now I can put my summary. What would my summary be for these paragraphs? Well, the summary I have is that the Scarecrow asks Dorothy for help because he's stuck on a pole. Dorothy rescues the Scarecrow, and he is grateful for her help. So I'm going to put that in here. I'm going to slide it on over. And remember, I changed my font size just so I can read it better when we come back. So, that is our review of the first chunk of the story. We're going to finish the rest of it later. Good job, guys, and keep up the good work.